It is Shrine Bowl week. Me and Zach have 11 guys we want to break down on this episode. Players we've watched some tape on. We're excited to see how they show up at the Senior Bowl. Guys we think are going to be risers. And we're going to explore, who should we be digging in on more? Who should we be keeping an eye on? Zach, the last video we put out, it smashed a ton of likes. But most importantly, man, the comments were flowing in. Folks dropping names of deeper, names in the draft that they wanted to get some feedback on, names to watch. We love that, guys. Seriously, keep that energy coming in the comment section because that's what we're here to do. We're here to have some draft conversation. So, Zach, let's get right into it here. Brandon Cleveland, defensive tackle out of NC State, 6'4", 315. You've identified him as a guy who could really show out at the Shrine Bowl week.
He's a late day two guy for me. I try to get in on these Shrine Bowl guys once the invites start rolling out. And I was watching Brandon Cleveland, and I got just excited about what he brings to the table. He's very versatile, just plays up and down that defensive line. There's a lot of strength to his game. He has great gap integrity. I love the way he could just stack and shed blockers. There's a lot of strength, and I enjoyed every bit of film that I watched of him. There was a lot of good. I think he's a very solid overall player that, he's not being talked about a whole lot right now. And I think when Shrine Bowl rolls around, I mean, you saw it last year with Indiana's CJ West, he just dominated and started, gaining more and more attention from the media in general, and ends up, getting drafted. I think this is a guy, Brandon Cleveland, who is going to be someone that gets talked about all week long during the Shrine Bowl.
Yeah. And, it's important, right? On the YouTube feed here, we have done 5 shows on the Senior Bowl, position by position, and we didn't give that much attention to the Shrine Bowl. But Zach, these guys we're talking about, right? These aren't just round 7 draft picks. I think folks have gotten accustomed over the years, Shrine Bowl guys, they're the afterthoughts. Like over the last few years, the level of talent here has really stepped up. So, if Zach's saying he's got a day 2 grade on a guy, we're not just gassing him up.
It's not just gas. I have a full eval on this guy. It's definitely worth watching, and I have zero doubt in my mind that this is going to be a riser for sure all week. He's going to be someone that all of a sudden starts hitting the timeline, and you're going to know that name pretty quick.
I love it. All right, let's get on to the edge position here. Keyshawn James-Newby out of New Mexico. Zach, especially sometimes the smaller school guys don't get as much attention from the area scouts, right? So getting to the Shrine Bowl, getting to show off that athleticism, relative to his peers outside of scheme, it can be really important.
100%. Obviously, this isn't an Alabama prospect, right? So being down at the Shrine Bowl in Frisco, going up against some of the best, because you just alluded to it a little bit earlier where the Shrine Bowl has a ton of talent, right? Like there's still a ton of talent, and James-Newby, I think, is going to be one of those new guys we really start talking about, right? He's not the biggest guy, 6'2", 244. That's fairly accurate from what I have as well. He's not going to light up the measurement scale of it per se, but there's a lot of versatility to his game. I like what he can do from a standard even front type of DN to a stand-up wide 9 guy. I think he has the speed and athleticism to do that. I also think he has the strength and power to be an even front guy as well. For me, if I'm projecting him, I think he's an odd front, off-ball linebacker type of guy. But I love his hand technique. I love his hip flexibility, his lower half flexibility. I think there's a lot James-Newby can do. I was really impressed with when he was asked to drop in the flat or in the hook curl. I thought he showed a really good instincts and the ability to read the quarterback and flow with the play, and also break downhill when he needs to with good timing and make a play on the quarterback to put some pressure on him. There's just a lot James-Newby that I liked and about him that I liked. And I think when it comes to, we were talking about this earlier, I had a ton of notes on him from, just a few plays where I had to go back and kind of finish his evaluation. And when we were deciding what guys to watch, I'm like, I'm going to go back and just, finish up my eval on him because I think he's going to be a solid player. Came back, was really excited with what I saw. So James-Newby, he's gonna light it up at the Shrine Bowl this week.
All right, I know we were chatting it up. You were saying you feel like you've been watching Eric Gentry for years now. Linebacker, outside linebacker, 6'6", 225. I know you find him versatile. It's an interesting frame here to try to translate to the next level.
It's an interesting frame. Like, you got to like the size, right? 6'6", 225. He's tall. He's long. He's rangy. I like his size. Like, am I going to be excited to put him as a Mike? Probably not, but he has played that in college. So he's got the experience to do so. He's also, got the experience playing off ball as well, experience playing will. Like, he's a very versatile type of player. I would project him more as a Will. I could see him as a Sam as well. But overall, he's got really good strength. He plays with a red-hot motor. I like his instincts. And when you're talking about a linebacker and your football IQ, you have to be at a high level. I think he's a very developed mental type of player that does a lot of things extremely well. And like I said, he's been on my radar for a while. I know he's been on the NFL's radar for a minute too. So I think this is a guy that's going to show out at the Shrine Bowl. I think he's going to be someone that, when you're talking to teams, and that's what you're doing down there a lot of times too. You're not just on the field making plays and show what you can do there, but you're also talking to, NFL teams and everyone else. And I think he's going to be someone that really kind of brings up, he's going to bring his name up quite a bit when it comes to his NFL draft stock.
Folks, if you want these full evaluations, Zach is just scratching the surface here. Prep Draft Pro, head on over to his Substack. I'm telling you, you want in-depth, brother, you got it. with Zach's work over there at Prep Draft Pro. How many evaluations you at now? Like 100, 150?
On the site, we're at like 156, somewhere around there. We got more rolling through though. We got plenty to get through.
Absolutely. All right, let's get on to the secondary here. Starting at corner, got Devon Marshall out of North Carolina State, 5'11", 200. You have to love that size there.
I love that size. You talk about outside corners, and that size 5'11", 200 is ideal. But you also got to love his physicality, the way he can tackle in space, the way he can hold that boundary, force running backs back inside to where his help is. I love what he brings to the table at that point in that aspect, and tough at the catch point, man. Playing through the receiver's hands and the ability to read the ball in the air and go make a play with good body control. Love what I see out of that from him. And he's, again, you want to be a smart football player when you're playing that third level, when you're, whatever position on defense, you don't want to be out of position. And you don't see that out of Devon Marshall from NC State here. I love what I saw out of him. And I think he's going to really show out in these one-on-ones. You got 7-on-7s, team drills, whatever it is. He's going to be someone that is going to be talked about a lot this week.
All right, well, let's go ahead. Let's get to the offensive side of the ball here, Zach. I've identified Joe Fagano as the quarterback to watch. Now, I got to tell you, this one's fun, right? You look at the quarterback group, throwing a couple more names out here as guys who could be risers. I think Haynes King is fun. I think he could do well in the interview. It's hard to see him as a pro-level passer, right? The big name is probably Cade Klubnik, right? He was a potential round one guy going into the season, but Fagano on the opposite side of this, man, FCS transfer coming up out of Maine. And I just love the decision making. And you have to think, right? An NFL team who's looking for a day 3 guy who could develop, they want to start with a good decision maker. 69% completion rate, 28 touchdowns to 1 interception, folks. He was the quarterback for UConn. Like, that is so impressive. I can't remember the last time they had a respectable passing game, more or less one with a quarterback who could manage a 28-1 touchdown interception ratio. I love his mobility relative to his size. He rolls out well. He extends the pocket well, right? If we're thinking from a fantasy perspective, which I always am, you don't always need to be Kyler Murray, right? You just kind of need the Dak Prescott threshold is what I call it. Look at Tyler Shuck last year. You just got to be able to move a little to be productive in that sense. I think he throws a nice spiral well into the deep field. I wouldn't say he's got a rocket arm, right? But I think this is a guy who, when you're going through passing drills and you see him throw, you see the next guy throw, he's going to look really nice. He's going to look consistent. I think scouts are going to really cling on to that. I like his ability to lead receivers well downfield, and I think he does pretty well stepping up and through the pocket under pressure as well. Zach, do you have thoughts on Fagano here? Is he kind of the quarterback that you're keying in on this week?
Oh, 100%. I mean, you brought up Cade Klubnik. I think overall, Cade's probably the better overall prospect and gets drafted earlier. But when you mentioned his smartness, his football IQ, his ability to put the ball where the receiver can go and get it and not put it in harm's way. You're going to want that from a quarterback specifically, but specifically in a class like this where it's not top level talent. top tier talent. Fagano is that guy. I love what he brings to the table. You said he doesn't have the greatest arm in the world, and you're right. It's definitely right around that middle of the range. But I think when you look at this quarterback class of a whole, he kind of fits right in there with some of the top tier guys when it comes to that. So I definitely like this shout out. Joe Fagano is a solid player.
All right, running back here, we've got Claiborne, 5'10", 195 out of Wake Forest. That's 1,956 rushing yards, 23 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons here. Claiborne, 4-year guy at Wake Forest. That's pretty rare to see nowadays. You watch him play, Zach, I mean, the explosiveness jumps off the page, right? He's explosive turning upfield. I think he's got really nice lateral agility. Sometimes a guy who's sub 200, you only see him doing it outside of the tackles. I particularly like Claiborne's ability to show off that lateral agility in between the tackles. He's decisive. He hits open gaps. I don't really see him dance around too much behind the line of scrimmage. So this is a guy, I know he's getting day 2 chatter. I think if he goes day 2, it's a round 3 situation. There are running backs who right now, probably 3, 4, 5 guys that I like as day 2 projections better than him. But this is what Shrine Bowl week is for, right? And Claiborne, I believe, was a Senior Bowl invite. So this was his choice to be at the Shrine Bowl. Certainly going to be an interesting guy here.
Yeah, he got the Senior Bowl invite. He's going to the Shrine. The size is what's going to concern me, is going to be a concern for me, right? I don't think he's 5'10". I think he's sub 5'10". And being that sub 200 is a little bit scary too. I also don't see him being like a sub 4.5 guy as well. But you kind of mentioned it. He is twitchy. This is an interesting running back class. And honestly, it's been like a kind of a tough one to evaluate as a whole. But that just kind of leaves, if there are question marks with Claiborne, you mentioned his twitchiness and his overall athleticism, I think is fine. But he's someone that could definitely jump up. And if he's getting day 2 chatter, yeah, I think it's probably round 3. But I do still think he's like an early day 3 guy at worst, round 4. If he gets to round 5, I'd be a little, surprised. But I think right around there is where you're going to see him get drafted. But definitely watch out for him this week. I think he's going to be a pretty solid overall player.
Yeah, I'm excited about Claiborne. I'm just looking here. They literally just posted the official measurements. I'm seeing if the producer can pull them up real quick here.
There you go.
The official on Claiborne, 5'9", 187. So this is a live update here, folks. Yes, you're right. That's a little light.
It's a little light. It's even lighter than I thought. Honestly, I had him closer to 200 than that. So he's from what I've seen, he's lost weight even. But yeah, being around that 5'9" range and under 200, it's going to raise concerns for overall workload, dependency. That's going to be something to talk about for sure.
All right, live updates here. I like it. All right, as we get on to the wide receiver position, want to make sure folks know, if you're enjoying especially the fantasy specific lens of this, head on over to patreon.com/rookiebigboard. As you've probably noticed, whether you listen to the podcast, watch the channel, right? We're talking fantasy football year round. We're tracking these guys from freshman year, Devy rankings, dynasty rankings, of course, 2026 rankings, over 60 fantasy specific profiles available over at patreon.com/rookiebigboard. It's not 150 draft profiles, but as you could tell with Zach here, that's how we separate ourselves in the fantasy process, because we're looking at the whole picture here and understanding the full draft class. Onto the wide receiver position, man, we're going back to UConn. I can't believe it. We're talking about 2 UConn players in the same Shrine Bowl episode. Skyler Bell, 6'0", 185, absolutely exploded in terms of production this year for the Huskies. 101 receptions, 1,278 yards, 13 touchdowns. Reliable hands, Zach. That absolutely stands out from his tape review. Just a 3% drop rate per PFF. You watch him play, man. He's a quick mover. He's got some nice twitch to him. I like his first step off the line of scrimmage. You can see him separate well with that release. But more importantly, he separates well through his routes over the middle of the field, right? And that's important because for Bell, again, with that size, I think he's going to project really as a slot receiver, but that's not, that used to kind of be a backhanded insult, right? the slot receiver position, man, especially over the last 3-5 years in the NFL, that's a critical spot on an NFL roster. So if you're thinking about a potential, round 3, maybe even round 2 ad for your NFL team, I think Skyler Bell is going to be a really nice contributor in that way. And depending on the scheme, I think he could come with some nice fantasy value as well. If he lands in a spot where he can get 75, 80 targets, even if he's somewhere around 10.5, 11 yards per reception, Bell is somebody who I could see making an impact pretty quickly in the NFL.
Would you be surprised if I told you he had more snaps lined out wide than in the slot?
No, I'm not surprised because, if you consider the context of the UConn offense and who they have there, like when I watch his tape, I can see him winning downfield, right? Like I can see him winning off the seam. I'm just thinking more of where he fits in an NFL offense. I think he's going to be best playing over the middle of the field.
I definitely agree. And part of the reason why I really agree is just because of his contested catch rate. Like, I mean, he was really good in that aspect, as well as, he put up over 1,200 yards. He had 13 touchdowns. I mean, it's not like this is a one-year thing either. He put up 860 yards last year. Like, this is a very well-rounded player. If I were to knock him, it would be his overall run blocking. I'm not the biggest fan of him as a blocker, but he is, he's around that 6 foot, 185 range. So I mean, he's not the biggest dude, so you wouldn't expect him to be like let's just say like a Carnell Tate type of blocker, right?
Kick him in.
Yeah, there's just so many things to like about Skyler Bell, and I love this shout out.
All right, we got one more here from the skill position players, and that is going to be Jack Endries. I personally think Jack Endries is the most interesting guy here, right? At least from a fantasy lens. Going into the season, Zach, I'm watching his summer scouting tape, and I mean, he was at the top of the class for me. He was tight end 1 for me going into the season. The production was very odd. He was featured early on in the season and then at the very end of the season. So overall, 33 receptions, just 346 yards, 3 touchdowns is not what you want to see. But over the last 2 games of the season, which was Texas A&M and Michigan, right? So these critical games, Texas A&M was a critical game. Michigan's the bowl game, but still 9 receptions, 128 yards and a touchdown. So about a third of his overall production came in those 2 games against higher level competition. When it comes to Endries, I love his body positioning. I think he translates well as a red zone threat. I do think that, the overall narrative on him is going to lean a little bit more towards his versatility, right? His ability to win a little bit further downfield than you would expect from a tight end. But I do think his positioning is what really helps him win in contested catch spots. And, that's something I'm always looking for in terms of touchdown production at the next level. I don't think he's a blow him out of the water run blocker, but I think he's got good enough technique. I think he's got enough strength that he's going to be able to compete in the NFL. So, but he's not going to be so good, that he'll only be left in line. I think the priority will be to get him in packages where he is catching the ball, or at least, a viable target.
Yeah, this is one of the guys. This is a tight end that, we did sleepers last week, but this is another one of those sleepers that I just don't think he's talked about enough. And just to give you a little bit more insight of how I go about things, I don't just look at this year. I also look at last year. So, obviously didn't have the production that he had the year before with Fernando Mendoza over at Cal, where he put up 623 yards on 56 catches. I don't think he was used properly at Texas. And, it's kind of surprising to say because you got a guy like Arch Manning and Steve Sarkisian there, like some very good pieces there to put together a very solid offense for a guy like Jack Endries. But I just don't think he was used properly because this is a very good tight end, very, very athletic, a very solid blocker. I honestly thought he got better as a blocker this year than he was the year before, and I really liked him as a blocker the year before. So that's kind of saying a lot in my opinion. He's got the size, he's got the athleticism. I know we're going to look at production and say, well, he only had 346 yards, and 2 of those games were a lot of his production. This is a very well-rounded player that is going to need a Shrine Bowl, rise to stardom type of moment, because I think he could be like a late day 2, early day 3 type of guy if we're looking at really guys that pop off the screen when it comes to the Shrine Bowl. And, you never know. You might even get the call up to the Senior Bowl as well. So there's always that opportunity too. But Jack Endries, I really like this guy.
Yeah, he's a guy I really would like to see get the call up. Do well at the Shrine, get to the Senior Bowl, and then there's going to be a ton of momentum behind him if that happens. All right, you better believe we're finishing it out with the big boys here. Brian Parker II, right tackle out of Duke, 6'5", 300 pounds. What gets you excited about him?
Yeah, man, he's somewhere between that 6'4", 6'5" range. He's around that 300 to 310 range. I love what he brings to the table in terms of athleticism. He plays with a ton of aggression. I love to see that out of an offensive tackle, someone that can pass block and run block. So he's very well rounded in that aspect. When you look at his size, I don't think he has the longest arms. And you bring that athleticism to it as well with the run blocking, pass blocking potential. He might even kick into guard. I think there's potential for him to kick into guard, even though he has almost 1,700 snaps at tackle over the last 2 years. So he's very versatile in that aspect where I think you could still put him at tackle, but he might be better at guard. So I think this is a guy, Shrine Bowl invite, accepted, going. He's going to dominate in one-on-ones. I love what I see out of Brian Parker. And if I'm going to pick another guy for a potential call-up, it's him, because I could see him as that late round 3, early round 4 guy as well. There's a lot to like with him, and someone that I think is going to be on the rise as we near April.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're finishing out. We've talked a lot here. Center class, not the best center class, but if you can find a guy in the mid rounds here from Shrine Bowl week, that could make a big impact right in the middle rounds of the quality of your draft from an NFL team perspective. And you're thinking Pat Coogan might be that guy.
I think overall, you said the center class isn't the best. I think overall as a whole, the offensive line class is not the greatest. From tackle to guard to center, I think there's a lot of questions that need to get answered. I think it was last year there was 1 or 2 centers drafted, pure centers drafted. This year, I honestly think there could be more. Logan Jones, Jake Slaughter, Matt Golbin, Pat Coogan right here, Sam Heck, Connor Liu, Parker Brailsford. There's a decent number of centers that I think are going to end up getting drafted. That's not going to say they're going to go first, second round, whatever. But Pat Coogan, I think, is one of those really good overall players where, you see him in the run game. I think he moves really well. I think he has a lot of strength. You see what he does on film, and it's a lot of really good things. And, Indiana was a fun story all year. And Pat Coogan being one of the guys to anchor that offensive line and really take the leadership role on that offensive line, I think was key, because you just see his football IQ and his ability to do a lot of different things in that scheme was fantastic to watch. I think Pat Coogan's going to be a drafted player, and I think he's going to go a lot earlier than people expect. And again, I'm not saying round 1 or round 2, but you're going to see Pat Coogan really put on a show this week.
All right, Zach, these are the guys we're going to be watching over the next week here at the Shrine Bowl. Practices over the weekend. The game is on Tuesday. Folks, these are the guys we're excited about, but I know there's more guys you're excited about. So let us know who in the comments. We're going to be jumping in there. We love having that back and forth conversation over on the YouTube channel. If you are listening to the podcast version, we appreciate y'all as well. Make sure you're subscribed, because we have a ton more NFL draft content coming your way all season long.